All right. Hi, Shannon. How are you? Hey, Miss Jen. Happy Wednesday to you both.
Hello.
Hi.
We'll get started in about a minute from now if you'd like, and we'll certainly go. Won't stay too long, but just want to welcome everybody to the space. And if someone at some point unmute, I don't have a moderator with me, so if anybody can either unmute or on the chat, let me know if they see my screen on in the screen. Yeah.
Is it celebrating
You see it,
student
Margaret?
digital lives?
Thank you. All right. We are gonna, as you, I think, enter the space, if you want to take a moment to sign in. I know that you've probably been doing it all day, so if that's an interest to you and want to sign in for the session, there is the bit.ly to do that. All right, and I wish I had some music or something to entertain you all for the last 30 seconds we have as other folks jump in, but I'll just do a very quick mic check with everyone on the call. If you on the chat, if my tone sounds like it resonates with you, I'm not putting too many people to sleep. Please let me know if my tone changes to or I sound different on the call, just to make sure that we're on the same page. All right, I don't see any comments on that. Two is if you are struggling with any of the terms or anything that we cover, if you just need some additional assistance or if you just need a thought partner in this space, please let me know. I will share my email address. I work with this school district for some time now, and so I'm happy to provide that insight for you if you need an additional partner. All right, let's get started. If you all are interested in, again, signing in, please feel free to sign in using the bit.ly. So my name is Jamie Nunez, and I currently serve as the Western Regional Manager at Common Sense. What that essentially means is I help educators across Western half the US address digital agency, digital citizenship. And today we are essentially going to be addressing how you can celebrate what it is that your students are doing online and maybe flip the narrative, flip the script around how students are actually doing things that reinforce engagement and learning online. I want to name a few maybe biases of my own. One is while I realize that there's quite a bit of negative things that happen online, sometimes I can, in the past, again, as a former high school teacher and administrator in the past, I've used those as learning opportunities in the classroom. And two is I'm not pro or against platforms like TikTok or YouTube or Snapchat. What I'm essentially trying to do is draw from those experiences to better engage and better bridge learning experiences for my students. So that's kind of the essence that I have. A number of resources that I'll share today are found in by registering on our site. If you haven't done so already, I'll quickly just give you the thing to do that. Here we go. Right. All right, so feel free to take a look at the deck itself so you can follow along on that piece together. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to get right into it just so you feel connected to this session. The first is I want you to consider your own beliefs around where you see your kids and their skill sets around this space. And the belief here in the statement that if you can, as you sort of reference, or as you consider digital agency and celebrating what it is that your kids are doing, is to think how you teach these skills when students are actually in front of a device. And that is like, what are the skills that are actually being played out every time you're engaging with technology? Be intentional about what those skills are because your kids really need it. And then the call to action really is threefold. Again, this is really just a preview of what we're going to cover. One is to make sure that in order to leverage and to assess and to celebrate the strengths of your students in their online spaces, We want to identify what those strengths are. In a minute from now, I'm going to share what that looks like. And the second thing is we want to make sure that there's quite a number of curators out there in these spaces. So your second grader or your high school students, they're curating content quite a bit. And I'll share in a second what that actually can look like to take those examples that they do online or while they're playing Roblox and apply them into the classroom. And then finally, we want to make sure that we are validating and highlighting the experiences that kids are actually having in online spaces. So provide you ways that you can leverage their own talking points or their skills that they are using to navigate very tricky issues, dilemmas while they're in digital spaces. All right, let me just let you know kind of the process. And I'm gonna stop sharing my screen just to let you know what this is gonna look like. For the remainder of the time, what I wanted to do is I want to give you all a very practical, like examples of what this would look like if I were running a classroom. At the very end, we'll probably have about 7 to 10 minutes at the tail end to talk about some of these examples. Now, they might not work in your classroom, or they might be really effective. But what I found is that they are very engaging ways to connect with your students. And a number of them are from some of your colleagues. I see Patrick, for example, on the call today. There's a number of examples that are used all within the district that I think would be beneficial to reach out to if you do see your own examples here on that. So, right. Let's start, and I'll just kind of envision what that looks like. So the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that you're highlighting what those strengths are from your students. And the best way to do that is first understand what those realities are, what it is that your kids are doing. You may want to address these realities with families, with your colleagues, but most importantly with your students, right? And one of the things that we want to be mindful of is that our kids love being curious when they're online. The biggest sort of trend that we've seen over the last year and a half is the site Omegle. If you're not familiar with it, it's where kids enter a space and then they're paired up with someone where they're talking to a complete stranger. Now, you might have red flags just like coming up for you, but the idea here is that the realities here is that our kids have their strength of being curious in online spaces. The second thing is, and again, if you're interested in any of the looking closely at some of these sites or the flow of that, feel free to click into that. I've shared this for a few months now, but with Roadblocks being another platform, there's quite a number of features that have been included in that. But one of them is Roadblocks as a platform continues to reward, validate students that actually build things on their platform, building games, building opportunities where other kids can actually engage. So the learning here, the strength here is that our kids actually enjoy building something, right? The coding aspect is very real for our kids, but platforms like Roblox enable that to take place. And there's so many things that I can speak about when we validate and celebrate those skills when it comes to Roblox that I'll cover shortly. And finally, as our kids get a little older, and again, this is probably like from fifth grade on, the curation aspect, their ability to take a photo or to take a video and to curate it, edit it, to distribute it, and then to market themselves within that video is very impressive. And so I like to think that as our kids move from building things or participating passively in online spaces to being curators, that there's quite a number of skills that we can leverage and celebrate and apply in the classroom. Most recently, there was a viral jumping. This is a really interesting viral that came out of TikTok, maybe about, I'd say, over the last 3 weeks now. Categories where kids jump into a pool or jump into places like a lake of some sort, and then they pose right in front of them. It's very curious kind of how they're positioning their bodies, but more importantly, how they distinguish between one category to another. To me, there's quite a bit of curation that takes place here. All right, so what does this all sort of like mean? The first thing we want to identify, and if I'm in your shoes the first week of school or sometime within the first month, is to identify yourself. What does it mean for your child to have digital agency? What are the things in which you are celebrating and highlighting and even assessing? When we think about agency, digital agency, or citizenship, or even digital well-being, we think about our kids using technology responsibly to learn, curate, or create and participate. What I would encourage you to do is to define for yourself in your classroom, what is it that you want to be seen from your students? How do you want to actually be celebrating them? What I would encourage you now, as you think about this, if you can take a moment to, on the chat, write what it is that you'd like to see, what statement you'd like to see from your students. How essentially are you defining digital agency, and when a child is actually doing something positive or contributing and participating in a healthy way online, what does that look like? Take a moment now on the chat to write down your statement. And if you're saying, Jamie, it's after lunch, I just don't want to say anything, or we're not allowed to speak, then you don't have to write anything in. Here's the link to the deck. All right, I won't. Yeah, nice, Carrie. Thank you. See, my students use technology to critically think and solve problems. Yeah, that they're thinking, not actually staring. You're right. I think that's very spot on, right? That we want to kind of move from that and assessing and celebrating when they're actually thinking critically. This could mean when they're looking closely at a particular video, or they're thinking independently in that. Oh, right on, Derek TC. I really like your statement, right? Accessing tech to clarify something we're actually learning. Yeah, that's key. Very spot on. And I'm terribly sorry. Well, I know you can't all see the chat because it's directed towards me, but I'll just use that, right? Sharon is great. Using QR codes to access information, jump quickly to resources. Yeah, the efficiency of being online, celebrating that. See students showing a video of family when they share poems, stories of writing. I love that, Angela, Adela. Yeah, Patrick, I love the fact that the digital newspaper, we'll reference that in a second, but being able to express themselves in a way that actually helps promote the overall school culture. I think 100% agree that those are all unique ways in which our kids are actually doing something that reinforce what we want to see from them. All right, let's move on in terms of like, well, what is this, Jamie? Now I've identified what I want to see from my students. And again, my first call to action really is to define what that looks like in your classroom and be really intentional about measuring what those metrics might look like. What does healthy relationship look like when they're doing exchanging and collaborating with a Google Doc? It's very helpful to name that for your students before you begin to celebrate that. I'm going to start with just some now specifics, or move into like, well, what does this actually look like? How do we celebrate that? And I've given this a number of times before, and some of your colleagues across the district, but I do think this is one of the more trendier, some of the things that seem to stick with students, and that is actually leveraging the student's ability to curate lots of information very quickly and then to produce something with that. Let me give you an example. This is called the sort of virtual DJ experience, or this is a connection that you can build with your students. Typically, when I used to introduce a unit in my classroom, I would often have a pre and post with students to say, how do you actually feel about this content? And then at the very end, I'd say, now that we've finished with this content, how do you now feel about this particular piece of information or the skill sets that you've developed? And it was a very interesting time because most students would like fill out a Likert scale, or say something very informal. One of the things that I would encourage you to do is this, which is have your students go into YouTube, and you can do this as an exercise if you like to now. And when you begin either the day as a check-in, or when you begin to introduce a unit, have them go to YouTube and pull out what it is that they feel, or what the particular content is, how they're resonating with that particular content. It's a very unique way to do that. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second my screen. I'll share my screen one more time, and I'll show you kind of what I would do in this case. I would build out a Google slide if you're connected with it, and I'd go into video, and I'd search for any video on YouTube, right? So this unit, if I'm understanding like a particular math, a sequential aspect of a math unit that we're covering, I might say that, this is making me extremely happy, right? And so what you can then do is click on that and have at the very end create a curated sort of list on a Google slide. So you have all your students go into a Google slide and then import all of the video that you have. And what you've essentially created is a repository of audio that can help to reinforce the skills that you might want to reinforce, or the skills needed for your students to feel connected to the particular content. It's a great way to just build off of that curation skills, because kids really resonate with that as a whole. Take a moment, if you do have access to the slide. I believe everybody has access to the slide. If not, let me give you access now. If you were doing this and you want to multitask, take a moment to think about your day. And if I were to ask you, how was your day at the very start of the day? How are you feeling? What would be a video that you would then incorporate or import? And again, what you want to do is you hit insert video, and you can type in whatever it is whatever video you think would be helpful to include, and then you could move it along the actual slide. If you are interested in modeling that, feel free to do so. We continue. I'll go back to that at the very end of our slide to see if anybody's curated anything on that piece. The second example I'm going to give you is to explore examples where you are highlighting a particular lesson. So you're bringing in content that you're seeing from these platforms into your lesson. There's so many sort of resources in order to do this, but again, I will reference the TikTok challenge that I think is helpful. You can reference a particular thing that's happening on TikTok and then have students discuss aspects of what they see in that video. Again, it has to be safe, and we have to vet this process, but it's a really great way to get students to be connected in the particular content. What I would consider doing if I were running a classroom, I would maybe think about the last TikTok challenge and to say, let's discuss the laws of gravity in this particular scenario. How high did the students jump? Where do we see the students jump, right? And that it's very tricky to kind of balance the video with the actual lesson, but it's really helpful for students to feel connected in that particular space. You might ask students to find other videos that they see that can reinforce a particular skill. In this case, if you're thinking about the laws of gravity in the sense, to find other videos where kids are actually jumping off of things. Again, we want to vet them, so they'd be a vetting process. The other thing you can consider doing is you can leverage YouTube to combine art videos with a particular lesson on something, right? This happened in my child's classroom when they were using Art Hub for Kids to reinforce a particular literacy skills that they were drawing on, or when they were covering nonfiction stories, they would have characters that they would all draw, and then the teacher would have them draw out the characters using Art Hub for Kids, and then those would be the characters that would then develop their story, that they can then develop their storyline. So these are all really kind of unique ways, but again, it's scaffolding kind of ideas from what you're seeing online. Let me take a stop one more time just so we can pause and ask if there's any questions or any change or comments that you might have related to that. Feel free to either unmute or share them on the chat. Devlin, thanks. I appreciate you. Shout out to you. Love Art Hub for Kids. It's a perfect growth mindset lesson. You're absolutely right. It's really helpful. And Patrick, I'm going to get to your piece in a second because I think it's really helpful. Any other ways in which you all incorporate those skill sets or videos or platforms into your classroom, feel free to share them with me and I can highlight or unmute. All right, let's close it off. I want to make sure that you have the final sort of piece on that, and that is thinking about using things that our kids are actually doing online. I've referenced this many times before, and this is one of my favorite examples. A math teacher that asked kids to quantify how often they were distracted by the tech notifications. So she opened the classroom up and asked her middle school kids to document how much time they were being bombarded with notifications, and then they quantified that into some experiences. So this is kind of an older example, but I think it sort of reinforces the point of bringing in technology into learning. I will quickly just gloss over it, but I think many of our kids want to understand the skills necessary to navigate tricky experiences. We have, and for probably a number of years or a number of months now, we've had these quick activities that if you have space and time to talk about some of the issues that students need to hear, you can use that in a number of ways. We have coloring books for younger classrooms to kind of reference some of the things that kids need early on to feel a sense of balance and connections with being online. We have a number of short videos that you can incorporate into your classroom and have conversations around. They're self-guided conversations. There's a number of reference links that I have. Here's a first grade lesson on how technology makes you feel. We've incorporated that with then a class discussion around what it is about technology that makes us feel a particular way. Again, we want to make sure that we are getting and pulling the skills from that. So, which is asking students things like, what can you do when technology makes you feel a particular way? How do you sort of build that resiliency skill up? And then again, if you want to incorporate art and drawing into these spaces. I've covered for you, I won't cover for you now, but I've covered for you unique ways that you can do that across K through 12 curriculum as a reference. All right, I want to just give you the last reference for you, which is discussing dilemmas. And I'll close with this, which is sometimes our kids need us as educators to address some of the dilemmas that they see online. Many times our kids don't know what to do when they're confronted with a dilemma, whether it's someone that is bullying them or someone that's sending them inappropriate messages. That tends to happen a lot with our kids. How to navigate any particular communication that they have with their peers in the playground that then just transfers into being online. And I'm going to give you some example. The example on the right is Patrick is here, but there's Roosevelt Middle School. There's a student newsletter that I just really admired that students took some time. I believe it was last year. Patrick, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But at Roosevelt, they provided and they created a student newsletter, a digital newsletter that went out to their entire community that allowed their kids to express, not only how they were feeling, but other aspects of who they are in online spaces. There was, I believe, years ago, a cohort of video clips about how students navigated the pandemic using just a wide variety of videos. On the left, I provided you an example of something you can do tomorrow, which is taking an old shoebox and asking kids to write in any questions that they might have related to their space online. And then you taking a moment, if you have a perhaps an intro sort of course, or if you have like a in between sort of period class you have, or even at the end of your lessons, to help to address some of these issues. I think it's very helpful for kids to have an outlet in order to connect and feel like they're celebrated and validated in that space. All right, I will close with just like sometimes you need apps in your life to kind of combat some of the anxieties kids feel when they're feeling in this space. This is another way for you to validate and celebrate and acknowledge that they're going through that. I provided you a link with a number of apps that help with mental health and social anxieties. Feel free to take a look at that link in the arm below. With that, I will give you the last 6 or so minutes to just, provide me with any feedback, and take any questions for you all, just in general questions that you might have as we close our session out. Maybe
Hi, Jimmy.
I'll reconnect the slides one more time for you, just so you have that, see if it actually works out. Any other questions you have before I let you close off? I'm going to see what you all sort of created on your slide, and then see what you. Oh, this is great. Somebody wrote, this is Queen. I love it. Yes. And then at this point in the day, you maybe feel like this. Labyrinth. It's amazing. Yeah. Oh, I wish I could play the audio for you all. This is wonderful, you all. And then John Baptiste, yeah, you guys are a good group, so this is beautiful. So hopefully you got something out of it. Otherwise, I will embrace your presence any other time. Any other questions you have, I will stick around for the next 3 minutes. Otherwise, you can head on to your next session. Thank you all for being alive today, and I wish you a beautiful start to your year. So, Lori, in case folks aren't aware, Kaiser members get a year off of Calm apps. Yeah, thank you, Lori, for sharing that. Lori Fetzer's got a great comment there that folks can actually apply free for the Calm app. All right, I will make sure that if you're still on the call and if you still need to get in touch with me and want just someone that can be your advocate for all this, there's my email address. Tell me if I can be your partner in any of these experiences. Otherwise, I should say I'm more than willing to help plan, even teach any of these lessons if there's time and capacity to connect in your classroom. All right, you all have a beautiful rest of your afternoon. Thank you again for being connected.